The human explorer sat in the dim light of the alien chamber, his breath heavy after hours of wandering through endless tunnels. He had been separated from his team when the ground collapsed beneath his feet, sending him sliding through a stone passage he could not climb back from. Dust clung to his skin, and the faint hum of strange crystals around him was the only sound. He thought he was alone until a shadow moved near the far wall. At first, he froze, his hand tightening around the broken scanner in his pocket. The shadow stepped forward, and he saw her clearly. She was tall, with luminous skin that shifted in faint colors, her eyes glowing with an emotion he could not read. For a moment, they only stared at each other, both uncertain if the other was danger or salvation. The woman lowered her head slightly, almost as if ashamed. Her voice was soft but carried through the chamber like an echo. You are human?" she asked. He nodded slowly, not trusting his voice yet. She took a step closer, her hands trembling at her sides, and then whispered something that made his chest tighten. "No one has ever touched me. Will you satisfy me first?" The words felt impossible, almost unreal. He thought perhaps he had misheard, or the translation device had failed, but her eyes were fixed on him with desperate sincerity. His throat went dry. He had faced storms, wild alien beasts, and deadly battles before, but never words like these. The air grew heavier as silence stretched between them. He wanted to ask her what she meant, but his tongue refused to move. Her body language did not carry seduction. Instead, it carried fear and urgency, like someone begging for life rather than pleasure. She stepped closer again, the faint light from the crystals revealing marks on her arms, patterns carved like scars. He realized they were symbols, old and deliberate, burned into her skin as if by ritual. She caught his gaze on them and quickly pulled her arms close, ashamed again. "They marked me because I am untouched," she said quietly. "In my people's eyes, I am cursed. To break the curse, someone must be the first. And no one here dares. Only an outsider can." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, though she tried to hide them. The human felt his heartbeat pounding. He did not know if he should step back or forward. Everything about her story sounded unreal, yet the pain in her voice was true. He wondered if this was a trap, a trick of the alien race to test him. But when he looked at her trembling shoulders, he felt it was not deception. She was desperate. The silence between them grew more tense, each second feeling longer. He opened his mouth finally and asked, "Why me? Why not your own kind?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Because they fear me," she whispered. "They fear the curse. They think if they touch me, they will die. But you are not one of them. You are not bound by our fears." Her tone carried both hope and sorrow. The chamber seemed colder, the hum of the crystals louder. The human stepped back until his shoulders touched the wall. He could feel the weight of her words pressing on him. His mind raced with questions. Was she telling the truth, or was she trying to lure him into something unknown? Her expression, however, held no malice, only a kind of fragile honesty that unsettled him more than any threat could. She slowly lifted her hand, not quite reaching him, but close enough that he could see the faint glow of her veins under her skin. Her fingers trembled as she said, "Just one touch. If you refuse, I will remain cursed. If you accept, you may change everything." He felt a chill run down his spine. Memories of his training echoed in his head, warnings about alien rituals, about how humans could be pulled into events they could not understand. But something deep inside him, an instinct, told him she was not lying. He could see her struggle to stand still, as if even standing before him was a battle. Her breaths were sharp, uneven, and her eyes never left his face. She looked like someone who had carried shame and fear for too long, and this moment was her only chance at freedom. He wanted to refuse, to walk away, but the chamber walls had no exits, and his heart would not let him abandon her without an answer. The silence stretched again, broken only by the soft crackle of energy from the crystals. He swallowed hard and finally spoke, his voice rough. "I don't understand what you want from me. You say you're cursed. You say you need me. But what will happen if I agree?" Her lips curved into the faintest, saddest smile. "I don't know," she admitted. "No one has ever tried. I only know that if I remain untouched, the curse will grow stronger. It will not only consume me, but bring ruin to my family and clan. They already treat me like a shadow. Soon, they may cast me out to die." She took a breath that trembled. You are my only chance." The human closed his eyes for a moment, trying to clear his thoughts. He had never asked to be part of alien traditions, never wanted to be a savior in someone else's myth. Yet here he was, face to face with a woman whose life hung in balance because of a choice he might make. When he opened his eyes, she was still there, waiting, her hand trembling in the air. The silence was unbearable. His chest tightened with the weight of the decision. He stepped forward, not close enough to touch, but close enough to see the tears escape her eyes. She whispered again, her voice softer than before. "Please, will you satisfy me first?" The chamber seemed to hold its breath with them, as if the entire world waited for his answer. The human stood frozen, the echo of her strange confession still heavy in his chest. He wanted to believe he had misunderstood her words, but her eyes told him otherwise. She was not playing a game, and there was no mischief in her tone. What she had said came from a place of deep pain. Slowly, she stepped back, as if afraid he would reject her immediately. Her glowing skin dimmed slightly, the colors shifting to a pale gray. He noticed again the marks carved into her arms, each one burned deep, not by accident, but by ritual. His voice came out rough, uncertain. "You said your people fear you. Why? Why do they think you are cursed?" Her lips trembled before she answered. "Because of our traditions," she whispered. "In my culture, every woman must be touched before her 20th cycle. If not, she is believed to carry a curse that brings shame and destruction to her family. I am past that age now. No one dared to be the first. No one will ever dare. They see me as a danger, as a living omen of misfortune." Her eyes lowered, and her voice cracked. "They marked me so everyone will know. They marked me so I can never hide what I am." She lifted her arm slightly, showing him the scarred symbols glowing faintly under the crystal light. The human frowned, struggling to understand. "But why can't someone from your own people break this curse? If it is only about a touch, why not?" She looked at him with hollow eyes. "Because to them, touching me means death. The elders say that if anyone from our people breaks the curse, it will spread to them. They will be cursed in my place. So they all avoid me. Even my family, even my own mother keeps her distance. I have lived all these years without a hand to hold mine, without a voice to call me beloved." Her voice grew soft until it was almost lost in the hum of the crystals. The human felt something heavy in his chest. He could imagine her life, watched with fear, avoided by all, treated like a shadow walking among them. He asked carefully, "And why me? Why do you think I could change anything?" She stepped closer again, though her hands still trembled. "Because you are human. You are not bound by our law. You are not chained by our fears. The curse cannot cling to you the way it clings to us. At least, that is what the stories say. I prayed every night for an outsider to come, but no one ever came, until now." Her voice held desperation, but also a strange kind of hope. It was as if she had waited her entire life for this one moment. The human's mind wrestled with doubt. Could it be true? Could a simple touch really carry so much weight? Or was this some kind of trap, designed to bind him into alien customs he could never escape? He studied her face carefully. She was beautiful in a strange way, but her beauty was not what struck him most. It was the loneliness in her eyes, a loneliness so deep it seemed carved into her soul. She sank to her knees suddenly, her head bowed. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "I am not asking for pleasure. I am not asking for your love. I am asking for freedom. Without you, I will be cast out. Without you, I am nothing but a curse." The human felt his breath catch. He had seen people beg before. Soldiers wounded on battlefields, children crying for their parents. But this was different. This was someone begging for the right to exist without shame. The chamber seemed to grow colder. He could almost hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. He wanted to turn away, to escape this burden placed on him, but there was no escape. She raised her head again, tears shining in her glowing eyes. "Do you understand now? This is why I asked you. This is why I confessed. No one else will ever do it. Only you." The human paced slowly, his boots scraping against the stone floor. "What if I say no?" he asked quietly. Her body stiffened, her lips parted, but for a long time, no words came. Finally, she whispered, "Then I will remain as I am. They will wait a little longer, and then the council will decide. They will either exile me to wander the wastelands, or they will end me, to cleanse the clan of my curse." Her voice grew small. That is why I had to ask. Even if it shames me, even if it frightens you, I cannot survive otherwise. The human closed his eyes, torn between fear and compassion. He had never been one to believe in curses, but he knew what fear and tradition could do. He had seen cultures on other worlds destroy their own people in the name of faith or law. Maybe this was the same. Maybe the curse was nothing more than superstition. But to her, it was real. To her, it was death. He opened his eyes again, and she was still kneeling before him, her hands clenched tightly, her shoulders shaking. She looked less like a woman now, and more like a prisoner waiting for judgment. He felt his chest tighten. He had not come here to be anyone's savior, but the moment he met her eyes, he knew he had already been pulled into her story. The crystals flickered faintly, casting their shadows across the chamber walls. The woman whispered one last time, her voice almost breaking apart. Please, if you refuse me, I have no hope left. If you accept, even for one touch, I may finally be free. The words settled in the human's mind, heavier than any chain. He realized then that this was not just about her confession. This was about a tradition older than either of them, a chain that could only be broken by a choice he had never expected to make. He stood still, silent, his thoughts racing. The woman remained on the ground, waiting, her body trembling in the cold air. The chamber seemed to hold its breath again, as though the entire world was watching. The human knew that whatever decision he made now would change both of their lives forever. The woman rose slowly from the ground, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Her eyes glowed faintly in the crystal light, and her voice was steadier than before. If you truly wish to understand, she said, then come with me. I will show you where the truth of my curse lies. The human hesitated, unsure if he should follow her deeper into the unknown, but something in her tone pulled him forward. She turned and moved toward a narrow passage hidden behind a curtain of stone vines. Without looking back, she stepped into the darkness. He took a deep breath and followed, his boots echoing against the damp floor. The passage twisted downward, colder with each step. The walls shimmered faintly, as if veins of light ran through them, pulsing like a heartbeat. The deeper they went, the more he felt the air thicken. It was as if invisible eyes were watching him, measuring each of his movements. The alien woman walked ahead silently, her body tense but determined. Finally, the passage opened into a massive chamber, wider and taller than any he had seen before. The walls were covered in ancient carvings, glowing softly in different colors. Strange statues lined the edges, all depicting tall figures with hollow eyes and open hands stretched outward. At the center of the chamber stood a stone altar, old and cracked, yet still humming with power. The human stopped at the threshold, unease crawling up his spine. "What is this place?" he asked. The woman turned to him, her face caught between fear and reverence. "This is the forbidden chamber," she whispered. "Our ancestors built it long before my people learned to write. It is where the untouched must be brought. The elders say this altar feeds on our shame, keeping the curse alive through every generation." She walked toward the altar, her steps heavy, as if she carried the weight of centuries. "I was brought here when I turned 18. They marked me here. They told me I would remain a curse until someone touched me under these stones." Her hand grazed the surface of the altar, and it glowed faintly in response. The human felt his throat tighten. The chamber radiated a strange energy, one that made his skin prickle. He stepped closer to the carvings on the wall and saw figures kneeling before taller ones, their bodies twisted in pain. Symbols spiraled around them, and though he could not read the alien language, the meaning felt heavy. Sacrifice, punishment, silence. "Your people still believe in this?" he asked, almost in disbelief. She nodded, her face grim. "Belief is stronger than truth. To them, I am living proof that the curse exists. They fear what they do not understand, so they choose tradition instead of mercy." The silence in the chamber pressed on them, almost crushing. The woman's voice lowered. "If you agree to touch me, it must be done here. Nowhere else will break the curse. But once it begins, there is no turning back." Her words hung in the air like a blade. The human stared at the altar, at the statues watching with hollow eyes, and his stomach twisted. He had stumbled into something far larger than one desperate woman's plea. This was not only about her, it was about the weight of an entire culture's fear. He stepped closer, and the floor beneath his boots vibrated faintly. A hum rose through the stones, and the light in the carvings brightened. The chamber seemed alive, reacting to his presence. The woman stiffened. "It recognizes you," she whispered. "The chamber knows you are not of our kind. It accepts you." Her words chilled him. He had never believed in curses, but the way the stones pulsed with light made him question everything. She extended her hand toward him, her fingers trembling. "Do you see now? This is why I brought you. This is why it must be here." He looked at her hand, so close, yet filled with danger. He could almost feel the energy radiating from her skin. He wanted to refuse, to escape this place, but the only way back was the path they had taken together. The walls seemed to close in, the statues leaning forward, waiting. The woman's eyes shone with desperation. "If you leave me now, I will never be free. The council will return me here again and again until they decide my life is not worth the risk. You are my only chance." Her voice cracked as she said the words. She stood beside the altar, her body small compared to the towering carvings, yet her courage was clear. She was willing to risk everything in this moment. The human's chest felt heavy with the weight of choice. He circled the altar slowly, running his hand over its cracked surface. The stone was warm, almost as if alive. The hum grew louder with each step, syncing with the rhythm of his heart. He stopped across from her, staring into her glowing eyes. He could see the fear hidden behind her determination, the hope she barely dared to hold. He realized she had lived her whole life for this one chance, and now it rested in his hands. The chamber grew darker for a moment, the crystal lights dimming, then flaring bright again as if urging him to decide. The woman whispered one last time, her voice trembling, "Please, end this for me. Do not let me live as a shadow any longer." Her hand hovered in the air between them, a bridge waiting to be crossed. The human's heart pounded as he raised his own hand, stopping just short of hers. The air between them buzzed with invisible power. The statues seemed to lean closer, the carvings glowing brighter. The hum grew so loud it shook the stones under their feet. Every instinct told him this was more than superstition, more than ritual. Something was about to awaken. He stood frozen in that moment, his fingers trembling inches from hers. If he touched her now, he might break her curse, or trigger something far worse. The chamber seemed alive with anticipation, as though the entire world waited for the choice of one human and one cursed woman. His hand finally closed the last small distance, and their fingers touched. The moment their skin met, the world around them changed. A shock of energy surged through his body, sharp and burning, yet not painful. The altar beneath them trembled, and the glowing carvings on the walls flared with sudden light. The hum that had filled the chamber grew into a roar, like thunder trapped inside stone. He gasped, stumbling back, but her grip on his hand tightened with desperate strength. Her eyes widened, glowing brighter than before, and her voice trembled. "It has begun. The chamber has awakened." The human's heart raced as the floor beneath his boots shifted. The ancient symbols on her arms lit up as if fire burned beneath her skin, traveling along her veins. She cried out, half in pain and half in relief, but she did not let go of him. Strange waves of energy passed between them, and he felt as if something alive was crawling inside his chest. The statues that lined the chamber shook, dust falling from their hollow faces, and for a moment he swore their stone eyes turned to watch him. He tried to pull his hand free, but the force between them grew stronger, binding them together like invisible chains. "What is happening?" he shouted over the roaring hum. She looked at him with tears streaming down her glowing face. "The curse. It is testing you, testing us both." Her voice was weak but filled with determination. "If you are strong enough, it will end. If not, it will consume us." The human gritted his teeth, forcing himself to remain standing against the trembling of the floor. The air grew heavier, pressing against his chest, making each breath harder. Images flashed across his mind, visions of alien faces twisted in fear, of fires burning through cities, of shadows whispering curses he could not understand. He staggered, shaking his head, but the visions clung to him. He could feel the chamber pushing his limits, forcing him to endure its judgment. The alien woman screamed softly, clutching his hand tighter. Her body shook violently as the symbols on her arms glowed brighter, almost searing. "Do not let go," she cried. "If you release me now, I will be lost forever. Her plea pierced through his panic, anchoring him. He tightened his grip, planting his feet firmly against the trembling stone, refusing to let her slip away. Then, suddenly, the chamber grew still. The roar faded into silence, the glowing carvings dimming slightly, though the air remained thick with unseen power. They stood in the middle of the altar, still holding hands, both gasping for breath. Her skin glistened with sweat, and her eyes glowed with new light. She looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. "You held on," she whispered. "No one has ever done that before." Her lips trembled between a sob and a smile. But before relief could settle, the altar cracked sharply beneath their feet, sending a deep echo across the chamber. From the fissure, a wave of energy burst upward, enveloping them both. The humans staggered, but did not release her. The energy wrapped around them like threads of light, pulling them closer together. The woman gasped, her eyes wide with wonder and fear. "It is binding us," she said softly. "The chamber has chosen you." The human shook his head in disbelief. "Chosen me? For what?" But the chamber offered no answer. Instead, the statues began to glow, their hollow eyes filled with faint light. One by one, they cracked apart, their stone bodies shedding pieces as if something inside them tried to awaken. The human felt a chill run down his spine. "What did we do?" he asked, his voice hoarse. She turned to him, her expression a mix of fear and awe. "We broke the silence. The power was locked for centuries, waiting for someone strong enough to face it. You are that someone." Her words filled him with both pride and dread. He had not come here to be anyone's chosen, yet now the weight of ancient power pressed on his shoulders. Suddenly, the wave of energy pulsed again, rushing through his veins like fire. His knees buckled, and he collapsed to the altar, still gripping her hand. She dropped to her knees beside him, clutching his arm. "Stay with me," she pleaded. "You cannot fall now. If you fail, the curse will claim us both." He struggled, fighting to keep his eyes open as the power threatened to drown him. He could feel it digging into his thoughts, testing every weakness, searching for doubt. Through the storm inside him, he forced himself to look at her. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes were filled with a strength he had not seen before. She was not only desperate, she was ready to fight beside him. That realization gave him new resolve. He clenched his jaw, pulled her hand tightly against his chest, and shouted through the chamber's silence, "I will not let it take you." The chamber answered with a final pulse of light, so bright it blinded them both. The hum became a scream, and then silence. When the light faded, the chamber was still again. The carvings dimmed, the statues crumbled to dust, and the altar stood cracked but quiet. The human gasped for air, his body trembling but alive. The woman collapsed against him, her body weak but warm. Her symbols no longer glowed painfully. Instead, they shimmered faintly like starlight. She lifted her head, her lips trembling as she whispered, "You did it. You broke the curse. I can feel it. It's gone." Her tears spilled freely, but her smile carried pure relief. He looked at her, still shaken, his mind struggling to accept what had just happened. Yet deep inside, he felt it too. The weight that had pressed on the chamber was gone, leaving behind only silence. They remained on the altar, clinging to each other, breathing heavily in the aftermath of what they had unleashed. But even in that fragile moment, the human knew this was not the end. The chamber might have accepted him, but outside these walls, her people would never understand what had happened here. And as he held her trembling body close, he realized they had just begun a journey that would put them against the laws of an entire world. The chamber was silent now, only the faint glow of dying crystals lighting their faces. The woman lay against him, still trembling but smiling faintly, as if she had tasted freedom for the first time. For a short moment, the human thought maybe it was over, that the nightmare of curses and ancient power had finally ended. But the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the passage behind them. His body stiffened, and her smile vanished instantly. Figures entered the chamber, their tall forms draped in dark robes, the marks of authority clear on their foreheads. The alien council. Their glowing staffs illuminated the chamber in sharp light, throwing shadows across the cracked altar. The human stood quickly, pulling the woman to her feet, but she lowered her head in fear. One of the council members, an elder with deep silver lines across his skin, spoke in a harsh tone. "You broke the seal," he said, his voice shaking with anger. And you dared to involve an outsider. The woman clutched the human's arm, her eyes wide. Please, she whispered, do not let them take me. But the elder raised his staff, pointing it toward her. You have disgraced your bloodline. Instead of waiting for judgment, you chose betrayal. You have broken the law. His gaze turned to the human, filled with fury. And you, alien, have defiled our sacred place. The penalty is death. The human's heart pounded, but he stood his ground. He had faced soldiers, monsters, and storms, but never an entire council ready to condemn him with a single word. Still, he refused to release her hand. She was dying under your curse, he said, his voice hard. I did what none of you dared. I freed her. His words echoed in the chamber, but instead of respect, the council members hissed in outrage. The woman raised her head suddenly, her voice trembling but strong. No, you will not punish him. If anyone is guilty, it is me. I asked him. I begged him. The elder slammed his staff against the floor, the sound like thunder. You speak as if you are not cursed still. The stain of your touch will linger on him, and both of you must pay. His words cut the air like a blade. Guards rushed into the chamber, armored and armed with glowing blades. The human's grip tightened on her hand. He whispered quickly, we need to move, now. She nodded, though fear shook her legs. They backed away from the altar as the guards approached, the glow of their weapons growing brighter. The human scanned the chamber, his eyes catching a narrow passage to the left, half hidden by crumbled stone. Without hesitation, he pulled her toward it. The guards shouted, charging, but he shoved her through the opening first and followed, the narrow tunnel too tight for the soldiers' large bodies. Sparks flashed as blades scraped against stone, but the two managed to slip deeper into the darkness. Their breaths came fast and shallow as they ran, the sound of pursuit echoing behind them. The passage twisted, climbed, and dropped until finally it spilled them out into the cold night air. Stars filled the sky, and the forest stretched out around them, vast and dark. The woman collapsed against a tree, gasping. They will never stop, she said, her voice shaking. They will chase us until they have my head and yours. The human bent down, gripping her shoulders firmly. Then we run. We fight if we must, but I will not hand you over. His words made her eyes widen, shining with disbelief. You would risk your life for me? She asked softly. He looked at her, his chest still burning from the power of the chamber. I already did, and I'll do it again. The forest around them grew alive with sounds, branches breaking, footsteps closing in, the distant hum of the council's hunters. She grabbed his hand tightly, her eyes glowing faintly in the starlight. There is a hidden path, she whispered. It leads to the old ruins, beyond the reach of the council. If we make it there, we may find safety. He nodded sharply. Show me the way. They moved quickly through the underbrush, their feet silent against the moss-covered ground. The woman's pace was uneven, her body still weak from the ritual, but she forced herself onward. The human stayed close, steadying her whenever she faltered. Behind them, the glow of torches flickered between the trees, growing closer with every moment. The sound of horns cut through the night, a signal of the hunt. The path narrowed, forcing them between jagged rocks and roots as old as the world. The woman whispered directions, her breath ragged, while the human kept scanning the forest for danger. At one point, a guard almost caught them, stepping into their path with a glowing blade. The human reacted fast, tackling the alien soldier and knocking the weapon from his hand. The struggle was short but brutal, ending with the guard unconscious on the ground. The woman stared at him with wide eyes, whispering, "You fight like no one I have ever seen." He only grunted, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Keep moving." They pressed on, the forest thicker and darker, until at last the trees opened to reveal broken stone towers, half buried in vines and moss. The ruins. She stumbled into the clearing, tears shining in her eyes. "We made it," she whispered. "This place was abandoned centuries ago. The council will not enter. They believe it is cursed even worse than me." The human looked around, his instincts sharp. The air here felt strange, heavy with old energy, but safe compared to the hunters outside. He led her into the shelter of a crumbling hall, where faint moonlight filtered through broken ceilings. She sank against the wall, exhausted, her whole body shaking from fear and relief. He crouched beside her, his voice calm but firm. "You're safe now. They won't touch you here." She lifted her face to him, her expression a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "You don't understand," she said softly. "By standing with me, you've declared yourself against the council. You can never go back to your people. You can never be free of me." The human met her gaze without hesitation. Maybe freedom doesn't matter anymore. Maybe what matters is that you're alive, and you're not alone. For a long time, she stared at him, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Then she leaned forward, resting her forehead against his shoulder, whispering words that trembled with both fear and hope. "Then we are bound, human. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Outside, the horns of the hunters echoed again, searching through the forest. But inside the ruins, a fragile bond had been sealed. Not by the council, not by tradition, but by the choice of two souls who refused to be broken. The ruins were silent except for their shallow breathing. The woman leaned against the cold stone, her body weak, while the human kept watch near the broken archway. The night was heavy with danger. Torches flickered in the forest outside, and the sound of hunters' horns still carried through the trees. He knew they had only bought themselves time. The council would never stop searching. He crouched beside her again, studying her pale face. "We can't stay here forever," he said quietly. She nodded, though her eyes were heavy with exhaustion. "There are tunnels beneath these ruins, old passages. They might lead us to safety, but they are dangerous. No one enters them anymore." The human gave a faint smile. "Dangerous is better than dead." She looked at him, her eyes softening despite her fear. "You risk everything for me. Why? You could have left when you first heard my confession. You could have walked away." He met her gaze firmly. "Because I saw the truth in your eyes. You didn't ask me for power or wealth. You begged for life. I couldn't turn away." Her lips trembled, and she turned her face away to hide the tears welling up. "Then I will trust you, human, more than I ever trusted my own people." Before they could speak more, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the forest, closer now. The human grabbed her hand. "Show me the tunnels, quickly." She led him deeper into the ruins. Past collapsed walls and shattered statues. Vines hung from the ceilings, and the floor cracked beneath their weight. At last, she stopped before a dark opening in the ground, half covered by broken stone slabs. "Here," she whispered. The hole breathed cold air, carrying the scent of damp earth and something older, something unsettling. The human looked down into the darkness, then at her. "Stay close," he said firmly. She nodded, gripping his arm tightly. Together they climbed into the tunnel, the stones above closing them into darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of her skin, casting eerie shapes on the walls. The air was damp and heavy, the silence broken only by the sound of dripping water and their cautious footsteps. As they moved deeper, the human felt the tunnel pressing in around them. Strange carvings marked the walls, older than the ones he had seen in the forbidden chamber. Unlike before, these symbols did not glow. They seemed to absorb light, swallowing the glow from her skin. The woman shivered. "These passages were built by those who came before. My people believe they belong to the dead." Her voice was low, as if afraid to wake something sleeping. The path twisted, narrow and steep, forcing them to squeeze through jagged stone and wade through shallow pools. At one point, the human stopped, raising a hand. A faint vibration hummed through the walls, like a distant growl. "Something's down here," he whispered. She clutched his arm tighter. "The Guardians," she said. "The council spoke of them, shadows that never die. That is why no one dares to use these tunnels." His jaw tightened, but he pulled her onward. "Then we move fast before the shadows find us." They hurried, their footsteps splashing through the water, but the hum grew louder, spreading like thunder through the stone. A cold wind rushed past them, though there was no opening ahead. The woman's skin dimmed, her glow fading as if the darkness drank it. Suddenly, shapes began to form at the edges of the tunnel, dark figures with hollow faces, their bodies shifting like smoke. The woman gasped. "They are here." The shadows slid closer, their movements slow but unrelenting. The human placed himself in front of her, his fists tightening, though he had no weapon but his strength. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. The first shadow lunged, its body stretching unnaturally, but he swung hard, his punch cutting through it. To his shock, the shadow burst apart, dissolving into mist. He blinked in disbelief, his heart racing. "They can be fought," he said, more to himself than her. More shadows came, crawling from the walls and ceiling. He fought them fiercely, his fists passing through their smoky forms, scattering them again and again. Each strike left him weaker, but he refused to fall. The woman watched in awe, her trembling hands clutching the stone. She whispered, "No one ever stood against them. No one, except you." Her voice gave him strength. He shouted with every blow, driving the shadows back until the tunnel was clear. Panting, he staggered against the wall, sweat dripping from his face. She rushed to him, her hands glowing faintly as she touched his arm. "You're hurt," she said softly. He shook his head. "I'll live. We just need to keep moving." She pressed her forehead against his shoulder for a brief moment, whispering, "You are not cursed. You are a shield. My shield." They continued deeper until the tunnel opened into a vast cavern. Starlight poured in through cracks in the ceiling, revealing an underground lake stretching into darkness. In the center of the lake stood a ruined tower, its top broken, but its base glowing faintly with ancient energy. The woman's eyes widened. "The Tower of the First Ones," she whispered. "I thought it was only legend." The human studied it carefully, his instincts warning him that their journey was far from over. A faint horn sounded again in the distance, echoing even through the tunnels. The council was still searching. He turned to her, gripping her shoulders firmly. "We can't go back. Whatever waits in that tower, it may be the only way to end this forever." She looked at him, fear and hope battling in her eyes. "If we go there, there is no turning back." He gave a tired but determined smile. "We already passed that point the moment I touched your hand." She nodded slowly, her tears glimmering in the faint light. Together, they stepped toward the edge of the lake, the shadows of the past still clinging to the air, and the tower waiting like a silent judge of their fate. The lake shimmered under the faint starlight, its dark surface broken only by ripples of unseen movement. The human stood at the edge, breathing hard, while the alien woman clung to his arm. Both were exhausted, but their eyes were fixed on the tower rising from the center of the water. It looked ancient, broken at the top as if struck by some great force long ago, yet the base glowed faintly with power, like a heart still beating after centuries. She whispered, her voice filled with awe, "This is where it will end. The curse, the council, all of it. The tower holds the truth." The human scanned the cavern carefully. The lake was wide, black, and still, but he felt movement beneath the surface. Something was waiting. He turned to her. "If we go in, we finish this. There's no coming back." She met his eyes, fear flickering across her face, but then she nodded. "I would rather face death beside you than live another day as a shadow." Her words struck him deeper than the roar of any battlefield. Without hesitation, he pulled her closer, then stepped into the water. The cold hit like knives against his skin, but he kept moving, holding her tightly as they waded deeper. The glow of the tower grew brighter with each step. Then the water surged. From the depths, dark shapes rose, guardians of the lake, twisted forms of stone and shadow, their hollow eyes glowing faintly. The woman gasped, clutching him, but he steadied her. "Don't look back," he said firmly. "We keep moving." The creatures closed in, circling them, the water churning with their movement. One lunged, its body half stone, half smoke, but the human swung hard, his fist crashing into it. The impact sent pain through his arm, but the creature shattered into mist, just the shadows in the tunnels had. Another rushed from the side, and he kicked it back, his breath ragged but determined. "Go!" he shouted to her. "Swim to the tower." She hesitated, unwilling to leave him, but his fierce gaze pushed her into motion. She swam desperately, her glowing skin guiding him forward as he fought through the guardians. By the time they reached the tower's base, his body ached, his lungs burned, but they had made it. Together, they climbed onto the stone platform. The guardians sank back into the water, vanishing into silence as if the tower's presence kept them away. The woman fell to her knees, touching the glowing stone. "It recognizes us," she whispered. "The curse has been broken here before, long ago. We are part of that same binding now." The human looked around, uneasy. The base of the tower was carved with the same strange symbols he had seen in the Forbidden Chamber, but here they glowed brighter, alive with energy. The air felt heavy, vibrating with a deep hum that echoed in his chest. "What do we do?" he asked. She looked up at him, her eyes wide but steady. "We finish it, together. I must give my blood, and you must give your strength. Only then will the tower accept us." Before he could answer, a loud crack split the air. From the cavern walls, figures appeared, council guards, their glowing blades raised. Behind them came the elders, their faces twisted with fury. Somehow they had followed even here. "Stop them!" the elder roared. "The curse must never be broken." The woman gasped, stepping closer to him. "They will kill us before we can complete it." The human clenched his fists, his muscles screaming but his spirit unbroken. "Then we fight." The guards rushed forward, their blades cutting arcs of light. The human met them head-on, dodging and striking, each movement fueled by desperation. He fought with everything he had, his body battered but refusing to fall. The woman stood at the tower, her hands pressed against the glowing symbols, chanting in her language, her voice rising above the chaos. The tower responded, the glow intensifying, beams of light shooting upward. The cavern shook, stones falling from the ceiling. The elders screamed, trying to stop her, but the human held the line. One blade cut across his arm, another grazed his chest, but he roared and struck back, sending the guards crashing into the water. Blood dripped down his side, but he did not waver. Behind him, the woman's chant grew louder, her body glowing brighter as if the tower itself poured energy into her. Finally, she cried out, her voice breaking. "Now, give me your hand!" He staggered to her side, his bloodied hand clasping hers. The tower's light flared so bright it blinded them both. Power surged between them, stronger than anything he had felt before. His body shook violently, but he refused to let go. Her eyes met his, shining with tears and determination. "Together," she whispered, "always together." The tower exploded with light. The cavern roared, the water rose in waves, and the guardians screamed as they dissolved into mist. The council members were thrown back, their staffs shattering, their voices silenced. When the light faded, the ruins were still. The tower stood quiet, its glow fading slowly, but the air was clean, free of the heavy curse that had lingered for centuries. The woman collapsed into his arms, tears streaming down her face. "It's over," she whispered. "The curse is gone. I can feel it." He held her tightly, his body trembling from exhaustion and wounds, but a faint smile touched his lips. "We did it," he said softly. "You're free now." She looked up at him, her face glowing not with power but with joy. "No, we are free." They remained there, holding each other in the silence of the cavern, the ruins of the past finally at peace. Outside, the world would not understand. The council would never forgive. But here, in this moment, they had broken the chains of fear and tradition. They had chosen each other over law, over curse, over death. As the faint starlight streamed through the cracks above, the human realized his life was no longer his alone. It belonged to her, just as hers belonged to him. Whatever battles lay ahead, whatever enemies rose against them, they would face it side by side. And for the first time, she smiled without fear, whispering words she had never dared to speak before. "I am no longer untouched. I am no longer cursed. I am yours." The cavern fell quiet, the tower silent, but something greater had awakened, hope.